Hello, everyone, and welcome to Funko Games' first ever live Q&A about Funkoverse. I hope everyone out there is staying safe, staying healthy, staying home. We here are very excited that we're able to do this virtually, engage with everyone, listen to your questions, and hopefully get you some of the long-awaited answers that you've had about Funkoverse. In just a minute, we're going to be joined by Chris Rowlands, who, as we know, is the lead designer on Funkoverse, one of many that helped bring this project to life. But to get us going, I would love to just check and test the chat functionality, make sure that everyone is tuned in, knows how to use it, can hear me properly. To start, I'm going to start with some trivia. Okay, so what was the name of the character of the shark in the movie Jaws? So if you know the name of the character of the shark in the movie Jaws, throw it into the chat. I'll give everyone just a minute. What's fun for me is that there's a 10-second delay between what I see and what I say. So I always have to give this lovely awkward amount of time for people to start putting in their answers into the chat. Yes, I have my wall of Funkoverse in the background. Made sure that was on display. Okay, the answers are rolling in. So far, no one is correct. Let's see if anybody can get it correct. And then I'll tell everyone that answered so far why you're so close. Okay, so we have a good pool of answers so far. So I'm going to start publishing these. The answer, the name of the character of the shark in the movie Jaws is the shark. Bruce, which is very commonly assumed to be the name of the character, was actually the name of the animatronic puppet that they used on set. So the name of the movie is Jaws, the name of the puppet is Bruce, and then the name of the character of the shark is the shark. And actually, you're going to be able to play as the shark in our Jaws edition of Funkoverse, which is coming out in June. We're getting some amazing questions in so far. So it looks like the chat is working. People are in the queue watching us, so we're going to get started. So hi, my name is Adam Minton. I am the marketing manager for Funko Games. I will be your moderator today. So to get started, I'm going to kind of talk through how this is going to work. So everyone should be able to see a live Q&A window in which you can say, ask a question, type in your question. I'm going to see it first, and then I will push it forward into the chat for everyone else to see it. And then I'm going to be asking the questions out loud to Chris, who you'll be able to meet in just a minute, to talk about his experiences, give any answers that he might have. So we may not be able to get to all of the questions that come in, depending on how many we have in. We do need to end just before 5 o'clock. So if we don't get to your answer today, I'm going to be compiling them, and we'll try to get them answered throughout the rest of the week and this weekend on our social media channels, which of course are at Funko Games on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So if you're not already following us, please do so. We're looking to engage more and more with our community, and especially as we have more games coming out, we want to make sure everyone knows about everything that we're doing. So what I'm going to ask everyone to do is to stick around, because at the end of this live Q&A, there will be one final trivia question where you get to possibly win your very own Golden Batman. There he is in all of his glory. So this is the Funkoverse mold for Batman. Comes with the golden Batarang and his golden base. So at the end of this, stay to the very end, and you will have a chance to win a Golden Batman. So without any further ado, we want to get into this. So I want to turn the screen over to Chris Rowlands, who is our resident expert on all things Funkoverse. So hello, Chris. Say hi to everybody.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Adam. Nice to see you. My name is Chris Rowlands. I am a game designer at Funko Games. I've worked on a lot of stuff over the past couple of years, but I was the lead game designer on Funkoverse. And basically what that means is I was kind of the one in charge of keeping the vision of Funkoverse moving forward. I was the one who was kind of there to facilitate all the different ideas that our studio was giving us about Funkoverse from a game design perspective. One of the things that I want to mention is that while I was the lead designer on Funkoverse, our studio is incredibly collaborative. So there was a ton of people behind the scenes that were also, game designers as well that were working on with the game. There's playtesters and workshoppers. And then in our studio, we have a lot of input from other people as well. So, we're there with the graphic designers, we're there with some illustrators, we're there with producers and project managers. And so really it's kind of a team lift. I was kind of just the game design lead for this project. And I'm super happy to be here.
Wonderful. So it looks like we already have a ton of wonderful questions coming in through the chat. So let's get started. So the first question from Anonymous, which most people are going to be anonymous in this chat based on the platform. What were some of your inspirations for the mechanics that the different characters use in Funkoverse?
So the Funkoverse was kind of an amalgamation of a lot of our different favorite elements from games that we loved. I've been a lifelong miniatures gamer. A lot of the people in the studio are the same way. And so when we began the entire process of Funkoverse, what we did was we all got together and made a big list of some of the things that we loved about some of our favorite games and some of the things that we felt could be improved on sort of in the genre itself. So that list was kind of our guiding principles for what eventually became Funkoverse. When it came down to the character abilities and the character powers, that's all driven by sort of the fantasy of those particular characters. One of the big things that I would kind of harp on at the beginning of the process was that every single character that we ever put in Funkoverse is going to be someone's favorite character. And that's really important to us to allow those people the opportunity to play their favorite character and have that character do something impactful or special. So, there's a whole bunch of things that go into making a character feel like they do in your imagination. And that's kind of what drove us to make the characters that we did. I mean, we knew that we were going to have characters like Golden Girls going, toe to toe with Batman and the Joker and those types of things. We knew that was a possibility. And so we needed them to kind of stand their own, but also feel like they were different in other ways from the other characters.
Wonderful. So that actually kind of leads into the next question of what is the process? And this is kind of a layered question with many answers. But what is the process behind the different intellectual properties that have been put into Funkoverse and that are coming up next?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different folks that have input on this. I mean, if you ask around the studio, we had our way. We would put everything in the Funkoverse. That's kind of where the idea stemmed from. And I think kind of going back to the genesis of the project, I think it kind of highlights a little bit of that philosophy, because when we started working on Funkoverse, it was actually before our studio was purchased by Funko. We were an independent game design studio that was working with Funko to create a game for them. Now, as Funko Games, we became part of that company. So they kind of this process kind of helped us learn how aligned our companies were, which is why we're partnered now. But in the beginning, what kind of captured our imagination when it came to from the Funko side was the fact that everyone is a fan of something, which is kind of the Funko motto. And when you look at people's Funko Pop collections and the way that we kind of embrace our different fandoms, it's very rare to have someone who's just a superhero movie person or just a Harry Potter reader. I mean, usually these things kind of cross over. And so for us, it was really important to kind of try to capture the width of Funko fans in our initial offerings. And so we wanted to come out with stuff that we felt were strong, character-driven properties where you get kind of like DC and Harry Potter. But we also wanted to show that we were willing to go and do anything and do the unexpected, which is where you get stuff like Golden Girls, or even I think to an extent Rick and Morty, which was, you know, the 4 IPs in our kind of opening wave. And that's all to kind of tell that story and spark that imagination. Part of the thing about Funkoverse is that what we're really trying to accomplish is create a sandbox where you can take your favorite characters from, you know, whatever you like, and you can kind of tell your own unique story with those characters, sort of within the framework of the game. It's something really visceral, I think, about that kind of connection that we have to the characters we love. I was on a podcast recently where I told a personal story, which I think maybe a lot of us can relate to at the risk of getting a little bit sappy. But, you know, when I was a kid and my mom would ask me, you know, what kind of bedtime story I wanted to hear when I was going to bed, I would always say, well, Mom, I want He-Man, I want Transformers, I want G.I. Joe, and at the end of the day, I want to save the day. And so she would create like a story based on those characters. And I think that's something that's really natural for fans of these properties. We want to see those crossovers. And so for Funkoverse, that's kind of what drives us, is we want to put characters in the game that people are attached to, and that will kind of get them excited about how, you know, they can mix and match.
Yeah, that's amazing. And, you know, there's a lot of different, you know, logistical reasons why, you know, we might be able to consider some IPs. Some are legal, some are just what we want to do. So thank you, Chris. And that's a lovely story about your bedtime stories. I didn't get to hear that. Yeah. So for anyone who's just joining us, I see some new people joining in. Please ask any questions that you want. Again, we might not be able to get to all of them, but we're going to try. So down at the bottom of the chat window, there's an Ask a Question button. So go ahead and type that in. I'll push that live so that everyone can see it. And also just a reminder to stay to the end, and you might get your own golden Batman for Funkoverse. Okay, so next question from the chat, which is an exciting one for us in the studio, and one that you may not be able to answer, but Joseph Kyle Rogan would love to know what new developments we can expect from the Funkoverse line in the second half of the year.
Well, we have a lot of stuff that has been announced for the second half of the year, and I'm actually I'm not going to, you know, name anything, because kind of working from home and not being exactly sure what has been announced and what hasn't been announced, I'm going to kind of let you handle that. But mechanically, the thing I want to say about the game design is that the opening wave of characters, the first 2 DC sets, the first 2 Harry Potter sets, the first Golden Girl set, and the first Rick and Morty set, I feel like we did a very good job at creating characters that felt really unique and special. But we also knew that those were going to be sort of the foundations of the system. And so now that we have sort of those kind of under our belt, and fans of the game are getting a chance to learn those characters and know those characters and know the scenarios, now we're really feeling more comfortable with the ability to really push the limits of those mechanisms. And I think that you're going to be seeing things that are unexpected in really unique, kind of interesting ways. I mean, I think you take something like, I don't think we've revealed any of the powers. This has been announced, but I don't think we've revealed any of the powers for the Back to the Future sets. But I think that when you start seeing some of the cards there, it's really going to like flip the entire idea of the Funkoverse upside down in a way that is going to shock a lot of people who are fans of the game, but also kind of get their mind going in kind of cool ways. And I think you see that a little bit with the Ian Malcolm's Chaos die. You know, I don't know if anyone would have assumed that like we could make a new die and give it to a special character, and that could be their special thing. Agritsuko's Rage token, that's a whole different mechanism that we brought in to kind of capture her essence. And we're going to continue to push those boundaries. I think that for this game, you know, I'm always talking to the team about pushing the limits of what is expected, and kind of going the next step farther than that. I think that's something that is kind of intrinsic to our studio in general. I mean, we make Funkoverse, but we've also made games like Disney Villainous that we partnered with Ravensburger on. We made the Top Gun strategy game as for Asmodee and those types of things. And I think we're always trying to push expectations of what types of things we can do in these games featuring properties that we love. I mean, it's something that our studio is very good at, and I think that we've gotten a kind of a pedigree, or maybe even we've gotten known for really pushing the limits, like of ways that we can explore these properties in kind of new ways.
Yeah, so actually that leads into one of my questions I'd love to be able to talk about. You were talking about how we, as a studio, have been designing games for other companies. So some people may have heard of Foresters and Creative or the pen name Prospero Hall. Can you tell us a little bit about how this studio became Funko Games, who Prospero Hall is, and the kind of the makeup of what our studio really looks like then, before the acquisition, and now?
Yeah, so when I started working for the studio, which is now Funko Games, it was called Force and Creative, and Force and Creative was a game invention studio that really covered all of the creative aspects of making games. So it was game designers, it was illustrators and graphic designers, it was product folks, it was also people who would literally coordinate with manufacturers overseas and domestic manufacturers to create products. So it was kind of a turnkey solution. And what we would do is we would approach companies that were board game publishers, and we would, say, here's some of our ideas, and then they would license those creations from us and then publish them. And that's kind of how we did our thing. And while we were doing this, there was kind of a shift in, I would say, just kind of general the gaming community. And we started to see a little bit more of strategy games being featured in mass market retailers. And Force and Creative was primarily a company that was really focused on mass market products. I mean, we had created other stuff for the hobby channels and created kind of more niche products, but really like the core of our business was the mass market. And we were seeing things in the mass market that was indicating to us that they were going a little bit more towards strategy games. And I'll use Disney Villainous as an example of this. Like I said, the game that we worked on with Ravensburger. So, we had this kind of at the time, it was kind of a wild idea that, hey, we think that we can create a strategy game, a Disney strategy game focused on the villains and kind of like targeted at a slightly older age group than some previous Disney products were, and we could put like a robust strategy game in that box, and it could do well. And to their credit, they agreed with us, and we went out and we made this product. And I think that kind of shifted a lot of people's perception about what kind of the quality, I guess, of the products that you were getting at mass market. So when we were doing those strategy games, we felt that we wanted kind of to differentiate those games from maybe more of the family and children games that we were making. And that's where the name Prospero Hall came from. Prospero Hall was kind of a pen name that we all used. Again, the same people as Force and Creative, but it was more to highlight the games that we felt were a little bit more aimed at a strategy hobby kind of audience. And then that leads into Funko Games, because as I mentioned a little bit ago, we approached Funko, and we had a relationship with them going years back because of some different business contacts that we had there. But we said, hey, we would love to make a game for Funko. You guys have these great pop figures, that such a passionate fan base. We want to make a game that's a kind of a love letter to that fan base that you guys have and you guys have cultivated. And then they're like, yeah, sounds good. So they kind of hired us to make a game for them. So that's kind of where Funkoverse came from. But then about halfway into that process, they were like, look, they looked at our studio and they said, here's the things that you guys really value as a studio, and here's your kind of the level of quality and passion that you have for the games that you're making really mirrors the level of quality and passion that we have for the collectibles. Why don't we purchase your game studio, and you can become our games division? And then that's kind of what happened. And as far as the sort of makeup of that, I mean, I think there are some elements that are different now that we are designers and publishers, but for the most part, it's the same team that has been making all those games for those other companies. Now we're just kind of making it for ourselves. And it's, it's a two-pronged kind of deal. Like, a lot of it is, it's a lot more work being a publisher. There's a lot of other challenges that, you have to face as a publisher. But it's really, really cool to have kind of the final say on a product and to have full creative control. And that's something that I think, I have nothing but, great things to say about all the publishers that we've worked with, but it's a lot different when it's like we're putting our own neck on the line for these games that we really believe in. We can take a lot more risks with something. I think something like Funkoverse, say what you want about Funkoverse, but ultimately it is, I think, a very ambitious project that I don't think any other publisher would have been able to risk doing. But we were really passionate about it, and we kind of willed it into existence in a way that I think is unheard of. I mean, a game coming out with basically six standalone games all at once across 4 completely different licenses, and in a compatible way with the kind of distribution that we had at the time. It was a very scary proposition, but very exciting. And those are the types of things that I think you're going to see more from us moving forward, is our ability to kind of like forge our own path.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's always exciting to tell the story of, the differences between Forest Brazan Creative, which now is Funko Games, that pen name Prospero Hall that you see, and definitely how this studio is so unique, that we don't really, we don't put designer names, right? Like, you won't find Chris Rowlands' name in Funkoverse because we are a collective. We're a group of people that work together, and we sign our games Prospero Hall. And that's kind of that mark of quality that we put on our titles that are, those more robust gaming experiences like Funkoverse. And you're going to see that name on more of our Funko Games products that are coming out this summer. Games like Back to the Future, games like Pan Am, which we're very excited about, Godzilla. So there's a number of titles that you're going to see coming out of our studio, coming out of Funko Games. And you can know that whenever you see Prospero Hall, that is that sign of quality that we really stand behind. So it's really fun to be part of this, commune, this melding of the best minds in gaming right now. So we have another question. And this is another one that I had on my list that I want to ask. So I'm glad you asked this question. So Nathan says, when designing characters, how much thought goes into character balance? He says that he imagines that when the game evolves, as do the rules, this can be difficult to keep consistent. Is character balance a priority? Or from a design standpoint, are you okay with some characters being sort of overpowered?
This is kind of I haven't answered this question. It's kind of a challenging question, because I mean the short answer is no. I'm personally not okay with certain characters being overpowered. That said, we have a system in place, and it's there's a lot of permutations. So I'm not saying it's outside the realm of possibility that could happen. But I think the core thing that we said from the beginning, and as I mentioned when I talked about kind of how the genesis of Funkoverse, is that we took a lot of things from games we loved, and we wanted to incorporate them, but we also thought about things that we didn't like as much, and we wanted to kind of fix those problems as well. And the thing that I was really passionate about was that keeping the teams small and making sure that no character was explicitly more powerful than the other. And the way I'm talking about that is like with points values. A lot of miniatures games have points where it's like, in that game, Batman might be worth 80 points, but Robin's worth 40 points because he's, theoretically half as good. That doesn't fly with Funkoverse because, as I mentioned, every single one of these characters is someone's favorite character. And if my favorite character is Robin, like, I don't want to feel like, oh, I don't want to take Robin, I'll just take Batman because Batman's better. So the way that we kind of handle that is through our scenario system. So something that we talked about at the start of the process was that we wanted to have distinct scenarios, because team building and character selection was so integral to what we thought was the core of the game. We wanted to create scenarios that were distinct enough that it would allow different characters to shine in different avenues. So, for example, you can have a Catwoman who is a low defense but very, very mobile. She excels as a burglar, as a sort of character that can go and get objectives in things like the flag scenario. Whereas Batman is a lot more of a tough sort of kind of brawl type character that potentially gets a defensive bonus, and he excels in things like territory, where he can kind of stand his ground and he doesn't mind if he's surrounded by enemies. So the characters don't need to be balanced in a complete and total vacuum. because as a player, you have a decision. You know the scenario you're playing. You can choose which strategy to employ in that scenario. And so that's kind of like the key element that we've kind of been thinking about in terms of balancing these characters, is that there's going to be characters that have pros and cons and are good in different areas of the game, and it's important to keep those identities moving forward. And I think that the other part of that question, which I think is really important to know, is that the system is only going to get more complex as we introduce new characters, because we have no intention of ever kind of slowing down the creativity that we're injecting into these characters. And so I think over time you will see small tweaks in the way that we word things, or the way that we kind of convey the language of the mechanisms in the game. I think that's going to be a natural sort of evolution of the system to kind of get these things that, when we first created Funkoverse, we might not have known that we wanted to create special dice. Now that, Ian Malcolm has a special die, how can the game support that? And so I think that those types of changes are going to happen over time, but ultimately the character balance is kind of situational. I will say, though, that we have a very robust testing schedule. We have all the game designers play the game. We do external play tests, and then we also have what we call a workshopping program, which is individuals who are paid to come in, play the game repeatedly. Oftentimes they'll be playing 20 hours a week or so, and they're going to constantly be sort of repeating these characters. And so we do test things very exhaustively. We crunch the numbers behind the scenes on the math of the stuff, but ultimately at the end of the day, we have to kind of say that Blanche might not be the best character in every situation, but there's going to be some areas where she really shines.
Yeah, I think that's really what makes the team building so exciting as part of the gameplay, is that you are going to find these crazy combinations of different characters and different play styles, especially depending on what scenario you're playing. For anyone who's just joining in, be sure you ask your questions in the chat using the Ask a Question button at the bottom, and stay tuned until we're finished, and you might get a gold Batman. Sorry, I love showing this guy off. He reflects the light so beautifully. Okay, so in the vein of team building and combining different strategies, do you, Chris Rowlands, have a favorite team?
Do I have a favorite team? I have my kind of pet characters that I like to incorporate as often as possible. I personally, one of the things I love most about Funkoverse is the fact that there isn't sort of an army building vibe to it. Like, I'm not going to always pick the same 3 characters and play them no matter what. I will say that when I'm putting together a team, I kind of have some slots that I like to fill. Usually I'll use someone like Batman, who's just a very reliable frontline character that I know can kind of stand. He can kind of go off on his own, but he also has some mobility where he can go and help his allies and bail them out of problems. So I like to include Batman on my teams. I've been playing a lot with Ray Arnold recently, who is from the Jurassic Park set, because I think that his ability to, for lack of a better term, knock himself out, because it could always be worse. I think that is a really interesting kind of combo that you can use with other characters. And so usually that 3rd slot I'll kind of swap out depending on how I want to try it out. But to me, I think that's one of my favorite things about Funkoverse, is that you're kind of incentivized to try out new combos and always find new ways to play and new things to explore. So I think that, like, I'm trying to think of if I have like really go-to teams that I can talk about, because I don't know what has been released, but I'll say Batman. I'll say Batman, Catwoman, and Ray Arnold at the moment.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think that's a pretty powerful team up. I will always have the Golden Girls in my team. I don't care what scenario it is. I don't care what the goal is. I will always have it. I mean, thematically. I mean, come on. Yeah. And also, we all know Blanche and Rose are complete powerhouses.
Yeah, I think the Golden Girls, going back to kind of choosing the IPs and stuff that we wanted to include, I think the Golden Girls are, when you think of the 4 of them, now that the 4 of them are whole once more, I think it's one of the strongest kind of factions or whatever you want to call them in the Funkoverse. I think that they all play really well with each other. I think that you can take any three of them, put them on a team, and they're going to have some really cool synergies. Like, I'm very, very proud of the mechanisms behind Golden Girls, and I think that they're kind of the most tanky characters in the game. I know that our friend Steph would always describe them as like the tanky frontline characters because that's kind of what they are. So that was something that was important to us. I love the idea of someday doing tournaments and having these really like hardcore tournament players show up, open up their case, and like put like the Golden Girls on the table. And so we wanted to make sure that we kind of gave those women the respect that they deserved.
Yes, and they deserve a lot of respect. So actually, there's a couple of questions here in the chat that I'm going to be able to knock out pretty easily. So there's a question about different IPs that are coming up. So marketing guy coming in saying, we can't confirm or deny any games that are in development that haven't been announced yet, but we would love to hear your suggestions of what you would like to see. So throw them in the chat, throw them on our Facebook page. We would love to see, like, if you had a dream set that hasn't been announced yet, what would it be? What powers would you want those characters to have? We'd love to hear any and all feedback that you have coming in. Another question about future sets is, when do the Jaws, Back to the Future, and Wonder Woman Funkoverse sets hit the market? So Jaws and Back to the Future, both 2-packs, are going to be hitting the market in June. And the Wonder Woman 2-pack, which has Wonder Woman and the Cheetah, just in time for Wonder Woman 1984, with that delayed release date, will be dropping in August. So those are the upcoming releases that we have announced that you can look forward to. So, Chris, to kind of hint on things that may or may not be in development, I know this is a hot topic all around the office, and talking about this team building and when people show up with their cases, whether or not this is actually in development, what would you think Funkoverse organized play might look like?
So to me, I think that I'll say this. So from the beginning of the start of Funkoverse, we designed it kind of as a game that could potentially support organized play. I come from a hobby games background. I know a lot of the people at the studio do as well. So we have a love for hobby game stores, and I personally have been part of a lot of organized play games in the past, and so we always kind of thought about that as a process. And to me, the thing I think that if we were to do an organized play for Funkoverse, I think that it would primarily be targeted towards casual play. I think that it is a very strategic and tactical game. However, I don't know if it. I don't want it to be put under the kind of in the category of being like a hardcore tournament game. I think that there is a lot of randomness to it. Of course, there's a lot of mitigation as well, which is something that we built into the system. I think that generally, this is my opinion, I think generally more skilled players will win more often than not. However, I think that really the core of Funkoverse is that imagination and that fun and that kind of the thrill of seeing the cool combos. And so I think that we would focus more on casual play. And I think when I envision organized play, what I envision is folks who have a collection, going to a store to play with people who have their own collection as well. I think that's kind of what we all think of when we think of organized play. And so, in my opinion, it would be some sort of rule set that would kind of highlight the fact that your team is adaptable, but also put some limitations so that the player who owns however many characters of Funkoverse that are in existence doesn't necessarily have like a super big advantage over someone who only has a set. So to me, that's kind of would be that sweet spot. Some of the things that we've talked about in the studio about this is, should there be some sort of drafting system, which I think is sort of difficult in a game where I want to bring my characters to the table. But another thing that came up was, is it possible that you maybe can bring, let's say 4 characters to the event, and every time you play, you choose 3 of those 4 to play, and so you still get to see the scenario and see the map you're playing on, and then pick your characters to kind of suit that. And I think that to me is within kind of the spirit of Funkoverse, and it provides players a really unique and kind of juicy option where it's like, oh, maybe I will bring Catwoman, but I'm only going to play Catwoman if we're playing, these maps, or if we're playing flags. If I can't, then I'm gonna play on with these more durable characters or something like that. So I think that would be kind of what I would look at for sort of a tournament structure, I guess, for Funkoverse. But again, it's a thing that I think is really going to be kind of community driven, at least, for the time period right now that we're in, where we're not able to go to some of these game stores that we love so much. I think you're seeing a lot of chatter in the Funkoverse Facebook groups and on Board Game Geek about what people kind of are doing at home for their own home tournaments, which I think is really cool. We've seen people sharing pictures of tournament brackets that they have played against their children, which I think is amazing. So we're kind of keeping an eye open. In my heart, I hope that someday we can do something that's our version of organized play, whatever that might look like. Because I love the idea of people getting together around this game and getting a chance to all kind of experience it together.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of a crazy time right now. We are floored to see the fan base kind of show us how they're playing together, what they're doing. I mean, constant video chat setups. If you have like this really groovy setup that you've established at home, share it. We'd love to see it. We're always looking for ideas on how to make sure that this game stays accessible, especially now that, we're going to be at home for a little while. We know that this is a good game for families to play, but this is also a game that, us adults might want to play together too, and it's harder to do virtually. So we have seen some really great examples of how people are doing that via video chat or like turn-based, like an old style chess game. So please share. We want to know kind of how you're adapting to this at-home style of play. So a couple of other questions that I'm going to be able to kind of knock out in my marketing role. By the way, for anyone just joining, I'm Adam Minton, marketing manager for Funko Games. We're talking with Chris Rowlands, lead designer on Funkoverse, one of the many talented designers we have at Funko Games. So we're getting some questions. Are there any IPs that are completely off limits, or are there any intellectual properties that you can't do or are really wanting to do? The short answer is, if you look at Funko, nothing is off limits. Right, it could be anything. So while there are some properties that maybe today I would be able to say, that would be really difficult to do, the universe is wide open. Funkoverse is going to be around for a long time. So that's why we always turn the question back on you, like, who do you want to see? Because it might be something that we hadn't thought of, and now it's like, oh my gosh, of course, we need to go after that license. So, the sky is the limit as far as where we can push Funkoverse, and then we also do our licensed board game. So maybe if a character doesn't end up in Funkoverse specifically, it might be its own board game or own franchise. So that's kind of the overall answer for anything that, like, hey, is this specific character coming? Are there anything that you can't touch? It's really, really up in the air. No yes or no answers to anything. And even if you guessed right and you guessed a set that we have this close to putting to the market, I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to say that's a great idea. And if you guess completely wrong, I'm going to say, I'm not going to tell you. That's a great idea. So please stick around to the end. We're going to end with one last trivia question in a few minutes where you can win your own Golden Batman. So back to the questions. From Nathan again, considering specific characters like Dr. Alan Grant, will we likely see other characters with unique ways to gain points?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't think there's any. I don't think we have it. I don't know how. I don't think there's any characters right now that are currently in development. And keep in mind that we're a year or so ahead of developing characters. I don't think there are any currently that provide points, but I think that it's definitely a possibility. Like, like I said, nothing's off the table. I want to talk about this because I think that this kind of plays back into the organized play thing in a weird way. So when we were coming out with these sets, the first wave, we'll say DC 100 and Harry Potter 100. When we created these sets, we thought about them as something that you could purchase, you could also expand on. But these 4-packs were also kind of in our heads, as I mentioned with that organized play question. In our heads, it might also be a starter kit. So if you are a player who wants to play Funkoverse and you want to play in this cool event or something, you want to go to your friend's house and play, you could buy a 4-pack and choose 3 of those characters to play with, and you would have your team. It's one of the things that we did with the ability token color. So when you look at a 4-pack and you look at what ability tokens come in that set, you're usually only going to get 3 of the 4 potential colors, and that's because we wanted there to be synergies there. So if I buy that off the shelf, I can make a 3-person team with those characters, and there are going to be some synergies there. So DC is kind of like melee challenge. They're close range challenge characters. They have a lot of maneuverability. Harry Potter has some kind of special tricks and things that they can do because they're obviously wizards, but they also have a lot of ranged abilities as well. When we were developing Jurassic Park, my first kind of question to the other designers in the team is I was like, hey, what can we do that feels like gives Jurassic Park its own identity? Like, what are these characters? Like, we have the melee characters, we have the range characters. Jurassic Park is the third, 4-pack. What is it that these characters do that's special? And the thing that I kind of came up with was this idea that, well, maybe they're focused more on point markers. So they're not even going to be necessarily focused on like the challenges. Their whole shtick is going to be they want to go and get points in other ways by interacting. And so that's kind of how you came up with these solutions of characters. Now, of course, you do have dinosaurs, and dinosaurs are very terrifying and scary, and they can do challenges. And of course, you have challenges for all the characters. But this kind of theme of point tokens mattering and interaction mattering kind of permeated in that 4-pack of Jurassic Park. And so that's kind of where we got Grant's this idea that he really cared about point markers on his, he wanted his team to get point markers, and then he could actually extract even more points from them. But again, it goes back to this overarching design philosophy. I mean, we're putting these things in the game because we think they're interesting, but we're also trying to kind of tell stories within the sets as well. And so I'm glad that question came up, and I'll say that, nothing's off limits. I think that you're likely to see other characters, some generate points in other ways. But I can't think of any off the top of my head that I could tell you about now that do that. So that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, y'all, there's so much coming down the pike that we're just like, I want to tell you everything that's coming, because there's so much excitement around Funkoverse, the way that it's going to evolve, and the new franchises, the new teams that you're going to be able to make. Chris and the rest of the team have been working really hard to keep this system innovative and cutting edge, and making sure that with each new set there are new experiences that you can bring to it, so that it's not just another set of characters, it's new abilities like the different dice. There's the Chaos die in Jurassic Park. Well, we've also talked about the DC 102 pack coming out in August, and that has a special die for Wonder Woman, right? So you're going to be able to see a lot of these really exciting new innovative things be popping up. We have a question from Joseph. I love when people notice this. Okay, so he's talking about the maps. So he specifically says there are borders that only make sense if the maps are designed to connect to each other. Are there any plans for multiple map scenarios?
Currently, right now, there's not any concrete plans for multiple map scenarios. That was always an option. Like I said at the beginning, Funkoverse is a game that we create, but once the fans get it, it becomes theirs, and we're very passionate about that. So, really, from my perspective, as someone who plays a lot of miniatures games, I wanted to give fans the tools that they needed to be able to create their own scenarios and do their own kind of cool, fun games. In my past life, I worked for a company called Games Workshop, which is a very big miniatures game company, and they make a lot of different types of miniatures games. And I remember these things they used to call apocalypse battles, where you would get down to your friend's house, you'd put every model you own on the table and you just play. And it wasn't balanced. It was just, you just play. You rolled a bunch of dice all day. And so in our head, we're like, oh, well, maybe players who do collect all the Funkoverse want to play with every character at once. Well, how are they going to do that on a board? Well, how about this? What if we put edges on the board that are open so that they can take all the sets together and they can make a big board and play a big game and, make up their own scenario or no scenario, just, do a challenge battle if you want. So I think that's kind of why we kind of did that with the scenarios. However, I could also see, in the future coming out with some sort of official scenarios, whether we release them officially on our website or on Board Game Geek, or maybe that's another thing that we could potentially partner with, game stores on, is kind of doing these kind of mega battle type things for them. So I think that, it's possible that we're going to come up with scenarios. But again, I'm really advocating for folks who are excited about Funkoverse to jump on Facebook, jump on Board Game Geek, and share scenarios that you're making with people. There's people who share scenarios all the time, and I don't get a chance to always, go through them and comment on them or read them. But I love that the community is sharing these ideas with one another. To me, that's like the sign that this game is really working. Is we wanted to create a game that would inspire that kind of fandom.
Yep. Yeah. So you mentioned big, and so we have a question in the chat. So we know, as Funkoverse fans, the Funkoverse Pop figures are a unique form factor. They're slightly smaller than the normal Funko Pop vinyl. So there's a question from our friend Anonymous. Are there any plans to make big characters like Godzilla or King Kong?
There are no plans to do that. This idea has been discussed. I think internally we use a service called Basecamp, where we just share ideas. And I think I started a thread I called it Funkoverse XL, because again, back to my Games Workshop days, I love the idea of like these, you have miniatures, then you have these gigantic titans that are just like, infinity points or whatever, and they're doing battle against these small little space marines or whatever. And so I love the idea of incorporating that. I think that for us, we want to make sure that the game is thriving and doing what we want it to do. And then I think eventually, someday down the road, who knows, maybe we'll actually visit that. This is another thing where I think the community would be a great kind of service. You can kind of help each other out and kind of come up with these rules. And I think that's kind of something that I have seen. It's not a specific question on this Q&A, but I have seen people kind of lament the fact that the T-Rex is not, a large size T-Rex and stuff. And to me, that's just kind of making sure that we're creating the most vibrant ecosystem that we can. And Funkoverse, from the very beginning, there's constraints that we built into the system to kind of keep everything on that even playing field. And so, unfortunately, we talked about the idea of doing an oversized character for T-Rex, but the maps and stuff that we have aren't really conducive to that. And our maps aren't like copy and paste. Like every map is designed to feel, different. And moving around the board is, I would say, the most important part of the Funkoverse game. It's where like positioning is the most tactical element of the game, in my opinion. Maybe only second to order of operations and figuring out which character goes first or second. But to me, I think the maneuver is so important in our game. And we didn't want to come out with a character that just wouldn't work on a Gotham City map or something like that, or had to like come up with these really complicated rules for it. But that's not saying that in the future we don't have I don't know what they said, Godzilla or King Kong or whatever, the giant donut character from The Simpsons Treehouse of Horrors or whatever. Yeah, all those are possibilities. Who knows?
Oh, now that's all I want to see.
Yeah.
I just want to see, what was it? But I want to call him Bob's Big Boy, but I don't think.
Yeah, I think so.
If you know the name for sure of the icon for the donate place, please put it in the chat just to confirm, because I can't Google while I'm managing the multiple screens here. Okay, so just a heads up, we're about 5 minutes from the end here, so we only have a couple more questions that we're going to have time to answer. But like I said, keep the questions coming, because we're going to try to answer some of these after the live stream to make sure that everyone knows what's going on in the Funkoverse. So we've touched on this just a little bit. But Chris, as you keep adding characters, do you find the need to rebalance any of the other characters? Or to put it in another way, have you ever put a newer character versus an older character after the fact and realized that it's deliciously broken?
Not yet. I think that, I mean, who knows, like, you know, where the future will take us. I think that I'll say that, like, we're very, very conscious of power creep. Our games team is a lot of us we've been playing up games for a long time, miniatures games, card games, all sorts of different types of game systems. We are aware that it's not fun, it's not healthy to continually like make characters that are strictly more powerful than their predecessors. That said, you know, it's really interesting, I think, with Funkoverse, because just as I get so excited about all the stuff that we're doing, and as I mentioned, we're constantly pushing the boundaries of what the game can do. But I had a chance to play some demos at different events, you know, late last year, and man, those original characters are so fun too. And so I think that, like, to me, as long as the characters feel fun, that's the number one thing. We're constantly looking at power levels. We're constantly sort of gauging things. If anything, I will say that I think that knowing what we know about the game now, you know, would it be possible to tweak some of the older characters to make them less powerful, potentially, or even maybe make them more powerful? Like, I don't know if we got them all exactly right, but it's a constant thing that we're looking at. So yeah, I don't, there's no plans to just go back and like do an errata on any of those cards or anything right now. So I think they all hold up very well.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, we kind of touched on this earlier as well. There are so many different combinations of all the characters and versus scenarios. It's very hard to say, you know, oh, this one character now needs to be reworked because it might actually be perfect in one scenario or another. They're so versatile, and they have to be, right? There's so many different things going on. By the way, Lard Lad. Thank you.
Lard Lad?
Lard Lad. That is the name of the character in The Simpsons holding the giant donut who comes to life in Treehouse of Horror.
Wow.
Yeah, I was way off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the time has come for the final trivia question of the session and your chance to win your very own Golden Funkoverse Batman. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to ask the question, and then I'm going to stall for a little bit with Chris's parting shots as people are answering the question. I'm not going to push any of the answers live, so it's not like you can just bounce off of somebody's correct answer. I'm going to hold all of them back. Since so many people are named anonymous, if you can, in your answer, just put like your first name and your answer. And then that way, when I announce who won, I can call you by name. So basically, it's going to be if you get the right answer, you win. If no one gets the right answer, we'll do Price is Right rules, closest without going over. And then if there's a tie, I have a random number generator, I will randomly pick the right answer. So here is the question. How many announced pop characters are currently in the Funkoverse? So this is announced characters that come with a pop figure. So no tokens, no generic characters. This is announced pop characters in Funkoverse. So as you are scrambling to Google to do your research, or if you know off the top of your head, throw your answers into chat. Again, please put your name and your guess. And as you are doing that, Chris, I'm going to turn it over to you for any kind of parting shots, anything that you wanted to share with us that you didn't get a chance to. Basically, this is your final argument of this session.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I first of all, really quick, I'm just going to go through a couple rapid fire things. Plans for new scenarios. Yes, there will be new scenarios coming out this year. We hear the community. We know you guys want new scenarios. There will be new scenarios. Will there ever be a rule set that allows for single player play? I hope so. I think it's something that we want to do. I think it'd be really cool. I can't say there's any plans for it specifically right now, but it's something that we're looking at. And I think that's and then a bunch of lard lads. So I think that's kind of most of the questions. I am really ecstatic. It's super fulfilling for me, and I'll speak on behalf of the rest of the team who's not on the call, to see how passionate people are about Funkoverse and how much people are embracing this thing that we love so much. It really is, for me personally, being the lead designer on it, I will say that it's a lifelong dream to be able to work on a game like this, a game that the type of game that I grew up playing, that kind of really got me into this whole world of hobby games. So it's really thrilling for me. The team is really active on pretty active on Board Game Geek. So if you have questions, you can always go to the Funkoverse pages there and ask questions there. And I'll give a shout out to, this is not an official Funko Games page, but there is a fan run group on Facebook called Funkoverse Pop Strategy Game Players. A lot of the team is there as well, answering questions. And like I said, if you're craving new scenarios, you're craving all sorts of creative ideas and seeing how other people are playing the game, it's a great outlet for it. There's a lot of really cool people on there that are posting. So big shout out to the Funkoverse Pop Strategy Game Players group on Facebook. But yeah, this has been awesome. It feels like the time flew by. I hope someday we can do more of these.
Yes, I think we're going to be doing more of these, especially as we come out with new games and new Funkoverse editions. I think it's valuable. I think people that are in, I'm getting great feedback. So I think we have given enough time for people to answer. There's a lot of answers in here. Some of them are right. Some of them aren't. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mute myself. And when I said I have a random number generator, I mean Alexa. And I'm going to ask her to give me a random number of the correct answers. And I'm going to unmute myself in about 20 seconds. All right.
Alexa has spoken.
Alexa has spoken. She has determined the winner. Okay.
Oh, mine just woke up.
She's apologizing because she doesn't know what I just said. Okay, so we're gonna count. Okay, so the question was, how many characters have there been announced in Funkoverse? So this is current and upcoming editions. So the correct answer is 32. There are 32 confirmed characters, past, present, and future, in the Funkoverse. So that is, count at home, Retzico from Retzico. From Back to the Future, we have Doc Brown, Marty McFly. From DC Comics, we have Robin, Catwoman, Batgirl, Batman, Harley Quinn, the Joker, Wonder Woman, and the Cheetah. From Golden Girls, we have Dorothy Zbornak, Sophia Petrillo, Rose Nyland, Blanche Devereaux. From Harry Potter, we have Draco, Harry, Ron, Hermione, Voldemort, Bellatrix. From Jaws, we have the Shark, if you remember from the beginning. His name is not Bruce, it is the Shark. And Quint from Jurassic Park, we have the Raptor, Dr. Ellie Sattler, Alan Grant, the T-Rex, Dr. Ian Malcolm, Ray Arnold, and then from Rick and Morty, we have Morty and Rick, and then the standalone Kool-Aid Man. So there are 32 past, present, and future Funkoverse characters, and the winner is a collection of letters that I don't know how to pronounce, but it's JEDICBCG. So I'm going to reply to you privately and ask you for your mailing address so that we can get you your very own Golden Batman. Special thanks to Chris. Thank you for joining us today. It was amazing having you. Yep, I think we're going to be doing this again for sure. A sincere thank you to everyone who tuned in today. The hope was to have this recorded. We'll see once I end the chat if it was. If it is, we'll get it up onto YouTube so that you can share with your friends who weren't able to make it. On behalf of the entire Funko Games studio, the team, everyone at Funko Official, thank you so much for tuning in. And let's keep the Funkoverse rolling. Thank you so much. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay home, enjoy your friends. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.